Standards are here since August of last year. Migration has started. In some cases, it's already in full swing. Now, for organizations that are still waiting on the sidelines, what's the biggest myth or misconception about post-quantum cryptography that you wish you could dispel right now?
Welcome to Shielded, the last line of cyber defense by PQ Shield, the podcast where we are moving the conversation around post-quantum cryptography from the why to the how. I'm Joe Lintzen, your host, and I'm here to guide you through the challenges, innovations, and solutions that will help your organization stay secure in the quantum era. Let's future-proof your defenses together. Hard to believe, but it's been 1 year since NIST finalized its post-quantum cryptography standards, a milestone that was supposed to kickstart the great migration to quantum-safe security. But a year later, what have we actually accomplished? And how much farther do we have to go? In this special anniversary episode, we're revisiting those early conversations with the people who are shaping the PQC landscape, joined by experts from NIST, DHS, Cloudflare, Signal, and leading hardware security companies to get an unvarnished look of what's working, what's stalled, and why this migration can't wait any longer. This isn't just a look back. It's your playbook for navigating the urgent, complex, and mandatory shift to post-quantum readiness. Let's dive right in.
I'd say, a little bit earlier on, it was, you don't have to do anything. You got to just wait for the standards. So you could just kind of put it off. But the standards are here. And now maybe some people think, okay, we've got the standards. We'll just, switch over, be a real easy, quick thing. We'll be done with this and we can get on with our lives. But I don't believe it's going to end up being just a quick, easy, simple transition. It's going to take a lot of preparation and effort and planning, and it will probably be a little bit painful. So I'd just say, be ready for that.
Maybe you can speak a bit more about that search for additional signature algorithms. I think there's, 14 candidates that are currently still in the running?
When we announced the algorithms we would standardize, we did select 3 digital signature algorithms, and we think those will fit the majority of use cases. However, one of them, so of the 3, 2 of them were based on what are called lattices, and one was based on a different idea called hash-based signatures. Now, we want to make sure we have diversity of security assumptions, because if someone were to ever come along and find a weakness or a new attack in, say, lattices, and we couldn't use those algorithms, we need to have other algorithms ready to go. So we do have one algorithm like that. It was based off of what's called Sphinx Plus. When it was standardized, we now call it SLHDSA. But its performance is not so good. It's kind of a bigger and slower than most people would be happy with. So while we have it and it's good, we wanted to take advantage of current and future research to try and come up with a more general purpose digital signature algorithm, not based on lattices, but that it would be better performing than Sphinx Plus. So this is kind of another mini competition that we began, and it's been ongoing for a year or two now. We're in the second round. Currently 14 signature algorithms are being evaluated. Come from a variety of different cryptographic ideas that mathematicians and computer scientists have been looking at. It'll continue to go for probably another 2, 3, 4 years before we select potentially 1 or 2 of these for standardization. And the main motivation, again, is finding something that can kind of be a backup to our lattice-based algorithms, and hopefully something that has a better signature size as well.
There's a close collaboration between NIST and CISA. Despite the fact, regulations oftentimes have been a little bit of a double-edged sword in cybersecurity, right? Sometimes they might accelerate adoption, but at other times they might create a little bit of a bottleneck. So, with NIST finalizing the standards and DHS rolling out PQC initiatives, what's your take on it? Do you see compliance as a driver or a potential roadblock for quantum migration, or maybe both?
So I'm gonna just make sure this is abundantly clear. This migration shouldn't be optional, right? It's not something that you should take and be, I can get it done later. As we kick the can down the road more and more. It is that you don't want. We don't know when a CRQC or cryptographically relevant quantum computer is going to come online. And the best thing to do is to be ahead of it. We are driving that kind of PQC migration. We've got these national memos, these national security memos. We've got executive orders. We've got OMB mandates. I don't think they're roadblocks. I think they're more of drivers. I think there's compliance within the federal space where we have to provide an annual inventory of our products, of our cryptography every year, which is what we need. But we need to be very aggressive on not only getting the inventory of the assets, but we also need to look at the data, which a lot of people forget. So we need to start inventorying our data. We need to start moving towards the migration activities that we talked about earlier in terms of getting the acquisition there. So I think we've got a lot of we've got a lot of work to do, and it's not NIST finalizing those algorithms were huge and getting that, because it really said we're serious about this. And then the OMB memo that was released to the federal agencies was further indication that the government's serious about this. And you as an organization, if you want to do work with the government, or even anywhere on the outside where you have a non-migrated system, and you're looking at an organization who has a migrated system, you may not be able to work with them. After a while, it's going to be, so you might put yourself out of business by waiting.
Yeah, and that's probably one way of enforcing and making sure that organizations are following those timelines, right? To say, well, if you're not taking these steps, then, well, likely you won't be able to sell into those government agencies any longer. In particular, if they're part of the critical infrastructure sectors like finance, energy, telco. So do you anticipate, for the mandatory PQC migration, you used the term, this shouldn't be optional, right? This migration shouldn't be optional. So do you foresee any more enforcement on those deadlines?
I think I've seen very positive influences from the administrations, past and present administrations on this, and that's a great thing, because I think everyone understands the importance of this, and I'm hoping we are more aggressive on this with other mandates and pushing organizations to be more just more PQC ready. We can't stay in transition forever. The longer you stay in transition, the longer you're actually leaving vulnerabilities out to other countries, other organizations, not so nice organizations.
I think the moment that NIST started this competition, it was a clear sign that this will be required at some point, right? I mean, they wouldn't do this at this point if down the line. I mean, it's serious. What this pleasantly surprised me is how thorough the U.S. federal government has been in pursuing this migration. Their initial executive order, then their post-quantum bill, another executive order. They're really serious about this, about moving that, and I think that's a huge help in actually getting this on the agenda, right? The interest there, and we see that there's other countries that are also actually differs quite a bit. They're actually also, some of them are quite in the front of things, and ahead of things. Germany's doing quite well, France, I'm listing all. But that really helps. Also, not just the compliance, but also the requirement that
federal agencies have to prefer products that are PQ ready. If there's a choice, they have to go for the PQ ready thing, and that really helps the market move forward. Yes. So on the one hand, that's great. On the other hand, compliance can also be difficult. In that compliance can, especially with validation, FIPS validation and standards, they take time to standards. You don't just have the standards of NIST itself, plus the downstream standards, they take time to write for people to get put on paper. And FIPS validation, that's made for a time when things move slowly, right? Where it can take a few years before a module is validated. There's a tension there with the timelines that we have now. Although I also see that at least within the federal government, they're changing things up a little bit so that you can be a bit more agile with having validation afterwards. So there are things to do here, but there's certainly tension, and which people are aware of.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, and I think Cloudflare certainly is leading the charge when it comes to the migration. I'm actually just back from a conference with payments and identity professionals, and again, I was reminded that many organizations are really only just waking up to what the urgency is to take a close look at post-quantum cryptography and what it needs to be done within those organizations. I think you can really speak from a background of experience because you've already several years into the migration behind you, right? So I guess based on that experience, where do you start? Like, what is a good step? What are the first few good steps that a company should and could take when they start that journey and start preparing for PQC?
So, if you wake up, that's already a very important step. Once you have executive level buy-in that this is a thing that we should care about, that's already a huge deal of the work, right? So that's really an important first step. For my work, I really think about this from a technical angle usually, but this is not as much as a technical problem, but it's more a process problem. That it's a change management problem as well. Sorry, life cycle management problem as well. That's I think a good way to look at it. So there's a lot to say here, but maybe to speak on some personal experience, and we are in the first step we are upgrading to post-quantum encryption. What do? You have to figure out what do we need to upgrade. Of course, no one at the company knows everything that's running at the company, right? You have no idea. So the first step is you ask each engineering team to try to figure out what software are you running, what connection are you running, what is urgent, what is less urgent, what are the steps required. Of course, this requires preparation, right? You need to get them checklists. The part of that is also there's a big, you need to have the expertise on board to help coach this. Because, for instance, one of the biggest, and this is not necessarily deep post-quantum crypto expertise, but also stepping back.
I can't say I'm sure what other organizations are doing. I imagine that people are doing things differently, and just like us, everybody's trying to figure out how to approach this. But one area where I suspect our constraints and our situation makes our approach different is that we don't have a team dedicated to the post-quantum transition. We don't have any individual that's leading a post-quantum transition. The post-quantum transition is part of our regular product development workflow. So how does that work? Like, no matter what, quantum computation or not, we always have to be looking around us and asking, what are the biggest threats to our users' privacy? right? What tools do we have to combat those threats, and how are we going to deploy those limited resources to use the tools and protect our users the best way we can, no matter what. In that context, too, when we look at the emergence of quantum computing, we don't see one giant monolithic threat that needs to be addressed. We see threats all over our application, all over our services. Some of those are big, and I'm sure we're going to talk about some of the biggest ones here in a bit. Some are small, some have straightforward solutions, some have, reasonable solutions to figure out, some we still don't know the answers to. But we have to take all of that together and continually assess, well, what's the best use of our resources? What do we solve first? And those solutions are going to go into the product development roadmap, just like anything else.
Yep. So was it then maybe some of that threat analysis that you just explained, was that what led you to approach harvest now, decrypt later protection as your first priority, or is there more to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's step back to early 2023 for that, when we decided, pre-standard. Yeah, this is when we decided we're going to go forward with our first harvest now, decrypt later deployment. And, what did the world look like then? Well, the entire internet effectively was subject to harvest now, decrypt later attacks, right? An attacker could just collect all network data, have a quantum computer later decrypt everything we're saying, every website we visit, and so on. But in particular, all of our users' messages, media, call contents, we're all subject to that. So, when I said we ask these questions, like, what are the biggest threats to our users' privacy? Oh, that's a huge one. Okay, but we were pre-standards at that point. But at that point, also, MLChem, then known as Kuiper, was already in round 3 of the NIST standardization process. It was based on years of research. The standard itself had seen extensive scrutiny. There was a clear risk that it was going to change before finalization. That happened to us. But did we feel like a major risk that it was insecure or broken in some important way? No, we didn't really see that. Also, we saw we could put together a protocol that was a small change for existing handshake protocol, reasonably efficient, not a big engineering effort. And we could prove that even if Kuiper was completely broken, that this new protocol wouldn't take away any security guarantees from our current users. So, no risk to our users' privacy, some risk to our resource allocation. That's kind of a no-brainer, right? The amount of protection we could get for that cost is something we just felt we had to do.
So the algorithms, we've been talking about them for a while. Dilithium, Kyber, Sphinx Plus, now standardized. We wanted to wait until they were standardized because we want to make sure we're interoperable with the rest of the world. If we implemented them in their pre-standard form, then somebody might start using them and they could get into trouble and have to change something later. So we've waited until they've been standardized to then add them to our product. The other aspect of this is, what API are you going to call to use these algorithms? So we could have implemented something proprietary. And in fact, we did, to allow people to test out for the algorithms. Yeah. So we created a custom functionality module, is what we call that implemented the PQC algorithm. So somebody could try them out with a proprietary API. But as part of this transition, which everybody has to work together on, we've have to work with Oasis, PKCS 11 stands to be able to make those interoperable calls to form the crypto.
So those functional module code, is that, I think you call it FM code? Sure. Is that once I customize that or I change it, do I break any of the certifications on the device, or how's that?
Yeah, because the certification is on the module and the firmware, which runs inside the module. If you customize that or change it, then it's considered new and you need to go through the certification again.
But you still have the physical boundary.
Yes, the physical boundary hasn't changed, the hardware hasn't changed, but the firmware running on that has changed.
So but there's legitimate reasons why certification is less important than the crypto that you can perform. And one reason why HSMs have this customizable capability is to add new algorithms.
Is that would you say that the idea of being cryptographically agile is already sort of inherent to an HSM device because of that?
It depends on your definition. Hey, crypto agility, because that means a lot of different things. To you, excuse me. It depends on who's asked it and we sometimes say HSMs have always been crypto agile because we offer many different algorithms. Even more crypto agile because you can add them on the fly yourself. So some sovereign nations which have their own crypto, they can use our product in that nation by adding in that custom crypto themselves, that sovereign crypto themselves, which we couldn't put into the core firmware because then we would have trouble with pips.
Okay.
Right. But if you want to take it a step further of crypto agility, and this is tying into PQC and that, I don't know if inflection point is the right term, but it's making people think of what should we do now. We don't want to hard code in PQC crypto. If we do that, then we're in the same position we were with RSA and ECC. We need to rethink how we're going to do crypto. And so I see, I don't think we're there yet, but I see us moving to a model where the end application will say sign. And for back end infrastructure, centralized security infrastructure, whatever we want to call it, will decide what algorithm that leaves. Yes. So it kind of changes the having to touch every application that performs crypto to then update all of those to I just need to say I'm going to sign something or I'm going to encrypt something. And the back end, whether that's key management, or whether it's an HSM, whether it's software of some sort, is making the algorithm decision.
Right. So it's really rather a migration from a given set of algorithms to crypto and agile architecture.
Yes.
That then uses the first set of algorithms that you have, but then as that changes and time, I guess they all agree that it will. It won't be as stable as we've been used to. But because you've designed it in a crypto agile way, now you're able to put them to your research.
When you look at the PQC algorithms, their evaluation is all theoretical,
Right.
Because we don't have a quantum computer yet to test out the theory that says they're going to be safe. Well, we don't know. We think we know. Smart people think we know. I think, and they're saying and so, but we don't really know. And there's going to be some more agility, newer algorithms that we'll have to implement in the future.
The biggest challenge that I see is the disconnect between the speed of cryptographic evolution, which I just mentioned, is very slow because the data is so much that we need to protect. And also the life cycle of hardware, that is also very long. And then you have this threat that is evolving very fast. So implementation timelines, life cycle of hardware are on a completely different timeline or a different scale, right? Years and tens of years kind of scale. While the threat evolution and the requirement evolution is happening literally every 2 quarters. Every 2 quarters, either a new update comes on the threat, or a new regulation comes, or a new algorithm is identified, or one leading algorithm is disqualified. So there is so much churn happening. So this dichotomy between, or this disconnect between, what needs to be done and the time it takes to do it versus how the requirements are changing and the threat is changing is the biggest challenge, and people are still not comprehending it. So it gives you a twofer, right? So first of all, if your device is going to be in market for next 10 years, then you are subject to CNSA 2.0 requirements, you should have started yesterday, because that device should have some PQC capability, because by 2030, every device fielded, subject to CNSA 2.0 mandate must have PQC protection. So that is one, that first you got to start very quickly if your device life cycles are longer. And then the other thing is that because it is evolving so fast, the threat is evolving so fast, the requirements are evolving so fast, you cannot afford to lock in something rigid. And that's where crypto agility comes in. That, okay, I will put in a PQC requirement, but if you lock it in an ASIC and that algorithm gets evolved or broken and a new version comes out or a new kind of threat comes out, then you're locked in with a useless protection. So this is where the traditional ways of doing things have to be rethought. And you have to think about crypto agility. A lot of people find agility and security oxymoronish, but this is what the need of the hour is.
That they need to merge, they need to come together. Yeah.
That means something, you have to put in protection in something that will allow you to upgrade it later. And then I would also mention one more thing, that the requirements and algorithms, their compliance and certification framework has not been decided. So where is this need for agility coming in? Why are we so worried about that these algorithms will be broken? Is because their compliance and certification frameworks are still evolving. They have not been released. So now you have algorithms that have been released that you are now mandated to follow, but you don't know whether they will pass their own certification or compliance or not. During that framework development, we might find vulnerabilities. So there is a widespread recognition in industry that we will see some evolution. Hence, the need for crypto agility.
So, there's standards that are being discussed widely, like, FIPS 140-3 or common criteria that I have a slightly different angle of looking at the compliance, but especially in critical infrastructure systems, how do you balance between the need for, regulatory compliance and the reality that you just described, right? I mean, there are going to be outdated systems, inevitably. So how do you balance, those competing requirements?
Yeah, so forward thinking from a product standpoint, future ready products. That's where taking in updated regulations or standards that are more general. Like I personally am, not speaking for the whole company because I've never seen every single contract. A lot of the utilities will mention FIPS 140, right? But a standard customer contract, they're not asking for it because it's not part of NERC SIP or something else like that. And so, when it is specifically asked for, like you have to fill out NERC SIP 7 reports and so on and so forth, as part of procurement or as ongoing assessments. And just in case anybody's not aware, from a utility standpoint, they have their own regulations. And part of those regulations cover the products that they use. And so we provide that transparency of which products, and, we'll specifically say these models are not, are at this level and, this level, because we understand they will, especially if they want to create a homogeneous environment. Like, I've always bought this one product, and as long as you sell it, I'm going to stick with that, even though you're 3 generations past that. And so they acquire waivers because they have additional defensive debt and mitigations. So from a product standpoint, future ready, but being able to revise and update for regulations for existing products, especially when it's a device, takes a lot of time and requalification, a lot of safety testing, right? And not just cybersecurity and such. And so those are always considered at the product level to see, where it's required and such. So.
Now you mentioned NERC SIP, of course, for some of our listeners who are not too versed with that environment. It's the National Electric Reliability Council, Critical Infrastructure Protection, if I'm not.
Yes, something like that. And then there's FERC, which is the Federal Electrical Regulatory Commission. So FERC sort of and so NERC works with working groups that we can become involved in, whereas FERC is the actual regulatory arm. Yes. And it's an actual type of kind of regulation. They've got audits. So if they're a utility and asset owner is running that utility or whatever, but it's mainly bulk electrical systems that it is over. And so there's audits that they have to go through, and it's quite involved. And there's different areas of that NERC, critical infrastructure protection that goes into grids and all sorts of things, grid management. So those are the other ones. I mainly know the NERC 7 and 13 because those are the product specific ones that I get asked about.
Right. And then they address generation, distribution networks, and that whole bulk of the power grid here in
That's right.
Of course, speaking of the US here. Right? So well, that's great. Thanks for sharing all that, Cassie.
Now, some of our past guests were kind enough to provide updated comments on what has changed for them during the past 12 months. Listen to their insights and see how their thoughts resonate with your own assessment of the current state of migration 1 year in with the NIST standards.
When you work towards a moment for a long time, it can be quite unreal to reach it finally. I used to start many talks with quantum computers threaten all cryptography deployed today, but that's actually now patently false. It will be very soon that more than half of all traffic on the web will be secured with post-quantum encryption. We're not there yet, though. There's a long road ahead for authentication. But we'll get there too, and it'll feel weird too.
It has been a really interesting time for us at Signal since NIST released the first post-quantum crypto standards. We did get a bit ahead of the ML-Chem standard, and that caused us a little headache or two. I'd say the standards have had the effect I'd hoped for, and the community's attention is focused. We're getting great library support. We can use these standards with confidence. But here's what's been interesting. As we've gotten deeper into detailed protocol design, we're starting to see places where the standards are close to what we need, but not quite there. So I'll share a couple of stories from our work over the last year. First, for the Triple Ratchet, which is our latest post-quantum update to the Signal protocol, we perform continuous key exchanges using ML-Chem as users send messages back and forth. And it's been great to have standardized ML-Chem with solid library support. But here's the thing. For the security of our protocol, all we actually need is something called chosen plain text attack indistinguishability, where ML-Chem was very appropriately designed to give a stronger chosen ciphertext attack indistinguishability. You'd think more security can't hurt, right? And usually that's true. But for us, using ML-Chem as specified and getting that chosen ciphertext attack security means we have to send some extra data, and there's a place in our protocol where one party gets blocked, right? This slows things down. So the more secure version of ML-Chem that's specified actually slows down our key agreement and concretely reduces security. And the irony is that chosen plain text attack security variant of ML-Chem is right there in the standard as a building block. So it'd be great to acknowledge that while the current standard has excellent security properties for general use, there are situations where variants would be better. Let's make those variants standard too. More recently, though, we're working on designing a fully post-quantum secure handshake protocol. And some interesting needs have emerged here. The most obvious for that is, for us, cryptographic deniability. This is a property that our current Signal protocol has and we want to keep. And to get that, we need something like a ring signature. Now, we can build ring signatures from NIST standardized signatures like Falcon. But I'll admit that's probably a bit exotic for NIST to look at standardizing right now. There are features much closer to the standards, though, that I think are interesting. For example, we see a real case for using Falcon's message recovery and key recovery modes. These are small additions to what's already specified, but they lead to concrete savings for us and for our users. I guess wrapping it up, I would say the standards have given us a great start, solved a lot of problems, and maybe that's given us time to go out and find some more problems. More seriously, though, they are an excellent foundation, but as we keep designing new protocols, we're going to need to keep building on that foundation. It's really exciting work. I'm looking forward to seeing how the ecosystem evolves from here.
And that brings us to the end of this special anniversary episode. 1 year ago, NIST gave us a starting line. What we have learned since is that this race isn't a simple sprint. It's a deep, strategic marathon that requires a full overhaul of our systems and our thinking. The consensus from our roundtable is clear. PQC migration is not future work. It is a current and mandatory reality. The time to build your cryptographic inventory, to embrace agility, and to engage with your vendor ecosystem is right now. My sincere thanks to our incredible panel of experts, Dustin, Moody, Garfield Jones, Bas Westerbaan, John Ray, Mamta Gupta, Cassie Crossley, and Rolf Schmidt for their unvarnished insights into the first year of this critical transition. Thank you, as always, for joining us on Shielded, the last line of cyber defense. If you found this episode valuable, please subscribe and share it with your colleagues. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay agile, and stay shielded.